Hi, my name is Lila. I'm 19 years old right now, but my story actually starts a long time ago.
Before we get into my story, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Check out our merch too. We craft our hoodies especially for you.
You see, when I was born, my mom, Grace, didn't make it. I don't remember her, of course, but I've seen pictures and heard stories. She was an incredible woman, and I like to think that she would have been proud of me for what I've achieved. By all accounts, her death totally changed my dad. They'd been soulmates since they met at 18. They overcame the distance of college and angry parents to get married and build a life together of their own. For years, they struggled and worked hard to build an amazing business. But when they decided it was finally time to start a family, the fairy tale fell apart. My dad tried hard to raise me by himself, and he did the very best that he could. But he never really made it out of the depression that my mother's death dropped him into. Instead, he managed his health with all kinds of medication and mood stabilizers. He tried to make sure he always had a happy face to show me. I love him so much. Unfortunately, his need to keep the business running and look after me didn't give him a whole lot of time for him to look after himself. He was vulnerable, and to a predator like my stepmother, it must have been irresistible. Yeah, I'm sure you can already see where this is going, but let me spell it out anyway. Nadine Ann Holden joined my dad's business when I had just turned 7 years old. She was a general office helper who came in from an agency to help with some filing. She managed to make herself indispensable to just about everyone, though never seemed to actually do any work. I'm sure you've met someone like her before, the kind that wears a shark smile on their face while they pass other people's work off as their own. It took less than a month to manipulate herself into a permanent job, and about another 6 months after that to worm her way into my father's life. They married the day before my 8th birthday. I should say at this point that I don't blame my dad for being fooled. Nadine fooled me too at first. I'd been desperate for someone to fill the mother-shaped hole in my life, and when she appeared, I was excited. For a little while, it was like someone had breathed new life into my dad, like Nadine could be the partner he'd had in my mother. But it didn't last. How could it? With the safety of a ring on her finger, my now stepmother's true nature began to leak through around the edges. She started taking control of my dad's medication, convincing him that his doctor wasn't really helping him and that she knew the perfect person he should speak with. One of her shady friends, of course. I don't know what they began feeding my dad, but he became strange, placid, and easily controlled. At the same time, my stepmother became hypercritical of everything me and my dad did, at home and at the business. Mistakes popped up in major deal documents that only she managed to find, just in time, of course. Expensive trinkets that had been my mom's would be found broken, and I would get blamed. She'd recall promises or discussions totally differently, and then accuse us of telling lies to hurt her. Life became a constant drain, and soon, with his mounting insecurity and destroyed confidence, she convinced my dad that there was something really wrong with him, that he needed to step back and take better care of himself, and that he shouldn't worry. She could take care of everything. Some sleazy lawyer she knew prepared the documents, and my dad's best friend and longtime advisor didn't even get a chance to look them over before everything was signed away. The house, the business, my dad's accounts and pension. Did I mention that my mom and dad had opened the business in our family name, Sullivan? Well, the paperwork Dad signed even meant our family couldn't use our own name to operate anything without her permission. Over one day, that terrible woman stole everything from my dad and me. I was 10 years old when I saw it happen, and I swore I'd find a way not to just get everything back, but to make her pay for the harm she did. My revenge started in small ways. First, I was determined to learn everything I could about the business. So I'd spend my Friday afternoons while she was out at the nail salon, hanging around the office and finding out how everything worked. I became good friends with the rest of the team as a kind of harmless office mascot and began to be given small, easy things to do. At the same time, I began to trace my mom's family. When she and Dad eloped, they'd both left relatives behind. My dad's parents had long since passed away, but my mom had a much bigger family. If I was going to take on Nadine, I'd need help after all. It wasn't as simple as I hoped. Although my dad was always loving and protective of me, he was also a broken man taking powerful medication. Finding out enough information to even get started took months. But one amazing morning when I was still only 12 years old, I spoke to my grandmother for the first time. "Oh, honey," she said, crying. "We made such a terrible mistake all those years ago. I'm so glad you reached out." "Me too. I'd like to get to know you," I told her. "But I don't want my dad to know yet." "I understand. There were a lot of harsh words said back then, and your father, well, we've let him be. I only hope the investment helped." "Investment?" I wasn't really sure what that meant, although I heard the word used around the office sometimes. "Yes. When your parents first set up their business, your grandfather and I couldn't let them fail. We had a friend who does a little investing here and there, and he passed the money on for us. We still have the shares," she explained. At the time, I didn't realize quite how important this conversation would turn out to be. Investments and shareholdings, they felt like important words, but I would have to go away and learn a lot more about business in general before I could come up with a plan. My age made things difficult for a long time, and every day I wished I could be older. There's so many things you aren't allowed to do as a kid that were essential for my plans. It was super frustrating. But I made good use of my time, befriending company employees, learning the detailed workings of the different departments, meeting customers, and strengthening my bond with my grandparents. My stepmother, on the other hand, well, let's just say her life was already starting to get a little bit worse in every way my sneaky self could make happen. I started with small things. The bottles of expensive makeup and hair products she bought always seemed to come out the wrong color, or would cause her to have terrible breakouts. She began to suffer from bouts of stomach flu before important meetings, and her schedule would become a mess of conflicting events. Nothing could be traced to me, I made sure of that. Just terrible coincidences at first. You see, I also began to sign her up for astrological and psychic mailings. When you're getting dozens of magazines and emails telling you about bad karma and mystical forces at work, at least a little bit of it has got to start to ring true. For a while, I was just happy to see Nadine miserable, to chip away at her the way she'd chipped away at my dad. But then something awesome happened when I was 15. I was helping out around the office, and I ran into a boy I knew from school, Aiden. Aiden was one of those popular guys, but he'd always been pretty nice to me, and I admit, I thought he was kind of cute. I was so shocked to see him at the business. Aiden, hi. "Hi, Lila, what are you doing here?" he smiled and asked. "Oh, this is my dad's business. I come and help out sometimes," I told him, real smooth, I know. "That's cool. I think my family is actually one of your biggest customers. My dad has a meeting today with the accounts person and told me to tag along to get familiar," Aiden explained. "Really? I'm here a lot outside of school. Maybe we'll bump into each other again." I think I must have blushed a little because Aiden gave me a big grin and nodded. "Yeah, if you aren't doing stuff now, do you want to maybe grab a burger or something?" he asked. And of course, I immediately said yes. There was a diner across the road from my office, nothing fancy, but it made great patty melts. So we both ordered, and I discovered how funny and kind Aiden was. "You must be really excited to have a business to take over when you're done with school," Aiden said. "Well, the truth is, I think my stepmother has pretty much taken it already," I explained, and Aiden looked shocked. "She's terrible. I'm just trying to learn everything to see if maybe I can get it back someday." Aiden thought for a moment. "You know, I think me and my family might be able to help out with that." I bolted upright. "What do you mean?" "Well, a business is all about customers, right? We're one of the major clients. Maybe we don't have to do business with her," he said. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "Yeah, how about you do business with me instead?" I suggested. That's right. Maybe I couldn't take back Sullivan's right now. It was a thriving company despite Nadine's terrible management. But if I set up in competition, I already knew practically everything there was to know about how we operated. I'd stayed in touch with all of the great employees Nadine had driven away over the years. All I'd need would be a little investment and some help on the legal side of things. I had to keep my involvement as secret as possible, after all, and I already knew where I could get help with both of those things. "Totally," Aiden replied. "My dad keeps saying it's time I start stepping up. Let's put a plan together for him. I bet he'd be all in." I was so excited that I jumped forward and planted a kiss on Aiden's cheek. "Aiden, this is amazing. You're amazing. I have to go make this happen. But here's my number. I scribbled it down on his hand. Add me. I left a $10 bill and practically ran home, dialing my grandmother's phone as I went. Lila, honey, everything okay? She asked. I told her everything, the whole plan. Building a competitor company, snatching over customers, and finally getting back control of the Sullivan name. Well, sweetheart, you know Grandpa and I will help however we can. Let me talk to him, and I'll call you right back. Once I got to the house, I went to a place I'd always been forbidden to go, my dad's home office. My stepmother had taken it half over years ago, but I knew Dad still had an old address book in there that listed the contact details for his friends and customers. It would be totally out of date by now, but I was betting at least one number would still be the same. Uncle Joel. Uncle Joel had been Dad's best friend before Nadine came along. I knew he was a practicing lawyer, too, and had been my dad's closest confidant. My stepmother had destroyed the friendship, but Uncle Joel still came by with birthday presents for me. I was betting he'd be able to help me set everything up.